something is happening in Hollywood.
Hello, we didn't get married?
Get married? That's ridiculous.
God, Will, you must be really
Bored! Yes! Yes, I'm bored!
How many hours a day do you watch TV?
6, 7 if there's something good on it.
While the studio system is hemorrhaging, a new way to interact with visual storytelling is emerging: clipping. We've all seen it by now. Short 30 to 90 second clips of pre-existing movies and TV shows pumped out in parts for today's For You page junkies. And while promotional packaging of TV and movies isn't new, I mean, we've all seen trailers before.
In a world within our world.
This idea that entertainment can simply be digested in chunks has created new industries around just that, chunks of content. So today, we're investigating clipping, what it is, how it's replacing movies and TV shows for entire generations, and how that format is now informing a new art form, verticals, created specifically with vertical, micro, nuance-free storytelling in mind, and asking, how is it better to reduce art to bite-sized, shareable moments? To get a better sense of what clipping is and how ubiquitous it is for promotion for TV and film, I spoke with Matthew Frank, who penned an article for The Ankler in September 2025 titled "Gen Z Only Watches TV Through Social Clips. Hollywood is Scrambling," about what he learned in his deep dive into the phenomenon.
This phenomenon where movies and TV shows and long pieces of content get diced up into these little minute-long clips. And that's a lot of the time how Gen Z and Gen Alpha and younger consumers are not only finding these titles, but are also digesting the content completely and not necessarily going and watching the show or the movie in full. You can sort of track the evolution of that with, how social media has evolved, where, over the course of the last couple years and since COVID and since TikTok, it's been a lot of not just text or images, but it's also these like short form videos where you're scrolling and you're just one after the next. And there's a lot of content that needs to fill up those pipelines. There are very few things better than, Hollywood IP or, a movie or a TV show, because that's professionally produced and it's well made. Unless, a studio takes it down, which a lot of times they don't do because they see it as promotion. They leave it up because it's a minute long clip of, Seinfeld or Friends or whatever it is. It's sort of evolved more in the last couple of years. And what's also helped is that now you have these clippers, these people who professionally do it. A lot of times it is the original rights holders and the IP holders. But in other instances, it's the studios or the shows, they're putting it out through these channels that are called like crime clips or something anonymous, where they can, are not necessarily like doing it through their studio, but they're monetizing off of it and they're dicing up the content kind of quickly because people's attention spans are shorter. So, you have these 1 minute long clips. And if you can make it something engaging in that format, it can potentially not only promote the show or the movie by, directing people to that show or movie, it can also just work as a piece of content on its own.
Okay, so this makes sense to me. A studio might not want to look too promotional and seeds their IP through pages that are just about a general interest, like true crime or comedy. But I guess what's weird to me at this point is that this apparently isn't converting the viewers. They're just watching the most clip-worthy moments out of context. You opened with a story about basically what seems like an intentional strategy behind the clipping of this FX show Adults. It premiered on Hulu. The views on that are huge on social media. Maybe that hasn't transferred to the linear version, but can you talk about sort of the reach of those clips on social media for that show? Like, anecdotally, were scenes from that show getting widely viewed by Gen Z, passed around? What's sort of the vibe of that?
Yeah, so out of that campaign, which was run by this 22-year-old named Max Peterson, who runs a company called Clip, which does normally these clipping. It's very on brand. It's very...
Yes.
A lot of times it's mainly for streamers like Kai Cenat or Jake Paul or whoever, a lot of these people whose business is in just volume and just being on people's feeds a lot and paying someone to have an army of 13,000 15-year-olds is a good way of doing that and spreading yourself all over. So they do it. A lot of times it's podcasts or, individual little bits of music like you'll see in a TikTok video. It's like, oh, do, an edit with this song. And now he started his first one with Hollywood was the FX show Adults, which was this, Friends Gen Z. And he did a clipping campaign for it. It was paid for by one of the producers of the show. And they ended up paying $15,000, which in the grand scheme of a marketing budget is not crazy, but it led to 2,500 videos across, these feeds, 40 million views, he said, which A lot of people that I talked to for the story said you can't really look at views as being the metric because we don't know if they're converting. We don't know if they're only staying there.
Right.
But, it is something where he got paid to do it and those clips got viewed. And there were some that took off and that, could have helped the show. Or it didn't. And, again, the jury is still out. It's hard to, prove a lot of these things unless you're doing it directly from the studios. You're saying, click here to watch more, which a lot of these aren't doing because you're trying to make it seem very organic and like something that's just kind of viral.
So what I'm hearing is that people are making a pretty penny editing these episodes down to shareable moments. And people are generally interested in watching those clips. But if the clip can't actually promote the show, i.e. converting into actual viewership, then is the future of Hollywood just clips? Are shows in the traditional sense over?
Talked to someone, not even related to this story, it was about another story, but who basically, was a 24-year-old who was like, yeah, I'll watch Law & Order, in like little 1-minute clips on TikTok, but I would never go watch a full fucking episode. Like, no, I would never do that.
That's wild. What a show to say that about. That's like the perfect show to do nothing. They have marathons on TV for this, but I'm a different generation. We're going to dive into the money. Who is spending, why they're spending, and what all of this says about what's to come for Hollywood. Clipping is more than just an easy way to watch only the highlights of shows and movies. It's also a burgeoning industry.
I emailed with this 19-year-old Russian who has made $30,000 from Simpsons clips since the start of the year.
Not too shabby. But when we talk about the money, I'm really interested in how studios are receiving the news that audiences don't necessarily need 22 minutes of action and drama, and how that might inform their plans for future programming. Let's give the guy who clips The Simpsons his due. If The Simpsons clips are doing numbers, do you think that any studio really has an incentive to make new shows then, if like there are old shows that can be clipped? Obviously we mentioned FX and adults, but if there's already a show that's been successful that they can kind of keep milking the IP for, do you see a world where that's actually where it heads, is like we're just going to keep watching the same shows over and over again in different formats?
I mean, that's a dark interpretation. But yeah, we're listening to so much old music. We're watching so many old TV shows and movies. It's not, it's harder to have something new kind of break through. I guess we could be heading towards that, but hopefully not.
My final question really is like, what is your most pessimistic or optimistic or both vision of like what Hollywood as a concept looks like in the next 10 years?
Let me start pessimistically. We can end with the optimism.
Yeah.
The middle class is sort of being squeezed from Hollywood, which is terrible to see and to hear about because there's so many people who, whether it's AI or whether it's just less appetite for new shows or movies, there's just less people who are able to be employed. And, production has already moved away from California and into, Canada and the UK and all these places where now if you're in Hollywood, quote unquote Hollywood proper, there's just not as many jobs in the production sense. The less shows and movies you make, the less there's going to be big hits and the less there's going to be anything that really breaks through and allows for, this reinvestment in movies and TV shows. And then there's the effect of consolidation. If Paramount swallows Warner Brothers, that's going to be one less studio. It's going to be like significantly less jobs potentially. It's a scary thing for the industry and for a lot of the workers. This does feel like a very existential moment for the industry. Optimistically, I mean, it's tricky. There's a lot of stigma around AI, and rightfully so. But you do hear a lot of, these executives saying like, hey, this is going to not necessarily take away jobs, but it's going to make people a lot more efficient. We'll be able to do a lot more productions and have a lot more capacity. And that could be something that allows for more product. But whenever there's a technology like AI, there is significant job loss. And it's really hard to avoid that. So optimistically, I guess that's the pessimism is seeping into the optimism.
TLDR, clipping showing up in a moment where Hollywood is in an identity crisis doesn't necessarily bode well for the future, specifically the future of middle-class jobs, whether that be union jobs on set or even in the post-production editing bays. We're going to look at a format that is essentially clipping on steroids and the big bets that studios are making on them.
Meant for the small screen, really never meant to be shown on a computer screen or definitely not in a movie theater. And these go for 60 to 90 seconds each episode. It could be 50 episodes per show or something like that. It could be more, it could be less, it could be a lot. But each single episode ends on a cliffhanger. So just imagine watching any soap opera or any drama. And, usually at the end of your 22-minute episode, whatever the case is, there's some kind of a cliffhanger. This one has a cliffhanger every single 60 to 90 seconds.
Jesus. This is Dexter Thomas, host of Kill Switch, a tech podcast about what it's like to live in the future. And I wanted to talk with him about vertical dramas, which you may have heard of, and if you have heard of them, you may think they're incredibly niche. But
I mean, everybody's trying to get into these things. Disney is now starting to get their hands into it. Back in August, Disney announced the latest additions to this thing that they have called the Disney Accelerator. So it's basically this program where they invest in something that they think is potentially going to make some money, but it doesn't have to make money immediately for them. They get thousands of applicants. And this year they picked 4 companies. The first one was some kind of AI animation software. And then there's AI 3D printing manufacturer. There's some holographic display tech startup. So, okay, this is all pretty futuristic / AI stuff. Okay, I get where this is. And then the fourth one is DramaBox, which is a vertical drama app.
wow. Just small upstarts like Disney getting involved. And before this conversation, I'll be honest, my understanding was that these were low-paying gigs, funded by China to supplement an actor's job at a cafe in Hollywood's crumbling economy. I mean, this is something that's like really exploded. I used to live in LA, and during the fires, I went down to Long Beach and I was sitting on the dog beach with my dog, and this other dog ran up, and the parent of that dog was like introducing herself, and she's like, I work at a cafe, but my like real main thing right now is these vertical dramas. And so I'm wondering, I mean, this is sort of an aside, but just talking about the economy of it, is this just sort of like Uber for actors too, where it's like you could get paid sort of a very low day rate to be in a bunch of these, and it's like supplemental income versus like a real steady union job?
I mean, define low day rate.
Right. I mean, she was saying, and this was months ago, this was before a lot of investments, I would say this was like January, and she was saying she was making like $120 a day.
Try 10 times that.
Wow.
Guy I talked to was doing a G a day, which, I'd feel pretty comfortable with 1,000 a day.
It's not bad.
Or not terrible working conditions. It sounds like it sounds like it's pretty chill. It's weird because I've talked to a few people who do not want to touch this stuff at all for various reasons. First off, non-union, which probably doesn't that only means a little bit to me, because I don't fully understand the industry like that. But basically, from what I understand is, most people who work in Hollywood, they're in a union of some sort, and you can't really take a non-union job because that causes a whole cascade of problems. And so you're actually sort of not allowed to work on this stuff, which means, for better or for worse, a lot of the people who work on these shows are not traditionally from Hollywood. There's some good things about that. You could argue there's some bad things about that if you want. It sort of depends. But even without that barrier, because, sometimes people, kind of cross that barrier if they think nobody's going to catch them. But I've talked to people who told me, I looked at the script and I don't want to be associated with this at all. It's a lot of violence, a lot of sex, a lot of sexual violence, implied and not implied at all. Just straight up bad scripts. I mean, think of whatever you would think of in your mind as stereotypical porn script.
Yeah.
But there's no sex. And so the fun part isn't even there. Just bad acting.
You really limit the audience with just the acting from porn.
Yeah, just the acting.
Yeah, I just love the plots.
Yeah,
no one finishes, but it's a lot of talking.
The real draw of this is not that the bad acting or whatever. Although I think kind of the melodramatic stuff actually is a draw for some people. But the draw is that it's pretty engineered down to really make you curious about what happens next. I don't think there would be anybody who would watch these things and think this is a brilliantly crafted piece of art. And I say that because, listen, I talked to one of the people who's kind of a pretty hot commodity, because I mean, this dude is very, very, very well known in the vertical drama community, because there is a community around this. He said, I don't really think we're at the stage right now where this is high art. He wants it to be, because, this is somebody who came out of a pretty traditional acting background, Shakespearean plays, all that sort of thing. And so he's got his heart where, he knows what he wants to make, but he also knows how he can pay his bills. But he thinks that the two could be bridged, which I don't think is impossible. But right now, it's definitely not that. It's all very melodramatic. It's over the top. The situations are silly, but it provides something for the people who watch it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm curious just about your interaction with that world, the vertical video dramas. Like, was it just curiosity? Was it confusion? Did they show up organically in your feed one day and you were like, what is this?
No, it's a great question, actually. So I know about this actually because a producer that we were working with, Alex, knows one of these actors, knows this guy. So we had actually a personal connection. It started mostly from him seeing his friend just become literally world famous out of nowhere. Teague has been interviewed, I think, a lot of places actually, because people are so curious about him. And so has Jen. But for me, I'm staying offline as much as possible.
Yeah.
I'm not on TikTok. I'm not really on the gram. Twitter, I haven't touched that since before they changed the name.
I'm jealous.
Yeah, I don't touch it.
You're describing a very luxurious lifestyle that I'd like to tap into.
To be real, it's not, I partake because I need to for work, but where they're really pushing this stuff is TikTok, because it's a format that's pretty similar. The idea is that, well, if you like TikTok, you'll probably like these vertical drama apps. And it's true. That's genuinely like a fair statement, and a fair statement of what the market is. But I happen to not be on it much. And so I wasn't seeing the ads for this. But anytime I mentioned it to anybody that I'm working on this vertical drama stuff, somebody would say, oh my God, I saw this on my For You page. And I was like, what the heck is this? And I looked at the app, but I didn't want to buy it. And so anytime I would mention it, basically everybody around me knew exactly what I was talking about.
I was curious about who exactly the audience is for these kinds of vertical dramas. After all, there's huge investment in what seems like an inexpensive thing to shoot, and people are paying. So who is the vertical drama community?
We usually tend to assume that any new media, any new technology, or any new media format, the first early adopters are going to be kids. Think of video games, think of TikTok, think of any social media app or whatever. And it's usually older people who are saying, oh, I don't understand that new stuff. I prefer what I grew up with. TV's better, or, whatever's better. I remember when we used to go to the movie theater, and that's really what art is all about. But that's not the case. It sounds like, from what Jen was telling me, it sounds like actually the developers of these apps assumed that they would be able to get a young adult audience, but they weren't. And I think some of that is because they're charging money.
Yeah.
And kids don't necessarily have money. You can ask your parents for money, which is how a lot of this functions, but that just didn't end up working out. And so the primary audience for this, the early adopters here, are middle-aged women.
Who are like, honestly, I mean, probably people who are primed to also watch daytime television, soap operas, who understand the format, even if it is, now shorter and like a little bit more melodramatic. Does that surprise you then that there's so much investment now? Because I think typically if like women are the first to adopt something, it kind of fizzles out.
Well, no. So this is the really interesting thing, actually. Anything that is for women is viewed to be lower prestige. Mm-hmm. And please understand that I'm using huge scare quotes around everything that I'm saying here.
Yeah,
this
of
isn't
course,
necessarily,
yeah.
My opinions here. But this is kind of the general view, is that if women like it, it must be less quality artistically. And it's not even if it's necessarily made for women. It's just if women like it. So the equation is a little inverse here. The thing is, the companies making this, they don't care. They don't care who's watching it. They care that it's making money. And so the artistic value of this isn't important to them. So this is what we got to understand here, is that the companies who are making this are tech companies, and they're looking at this coming from a tech company lens. What they're interested in is watch time. What they're interested in is user acquisition, maximizing the profits, turning stuff around. How can we be efficient about things?
Yeah, return visits.
Yeah, return visits, all these sorts of things. And so, the same sort of thing that we should look at any of these apps the same way that we look at Instagram, or the same way we look at Facebook, which is they want you to stay on the app. That's really all they're interested in. If it turns out that middle-aged women are spending a bunch of money here, they're very happy to take their money.
I, as I'm sure we all now are, wondered if Dexter thought that the sudden success of this new shiny format meant a shift for entertainment more broadly.
There are people who have completely deleted Netflix, deleted Hulu. They've cut that because if you're really into, say, romance dramas and things like that, there might not really be anything out there for you. Like there's a certain format of rom-com that you might feel like isn't really getting made anymore. They're still making those. It's just vertical. It's just very short and stripped down and cut down. I mean, just, imagine like a rom-com just without any real character development, without any quietness. There's no quiet scenes. There's no montages. It's just all dialogue, action, slaps. There's a lot of slaps.
A lot of slapping. You don't see slapping on TV as much.
Yeah, you bring back the slaps. Bring back the slaps.
Exactly. It turns out as a society, we do like slaps. And we really want them.
Clearly people need to get slapped. And sometimes, I don't know, man. Yeah. But there's a lot of slaps. Like there is a high density, the slap to conversation ratio on verticals is really high. I'm not playing with you. Well, because T was telling me this. He was saying he was having a conversation with somebody and they were suggesting that it's best if there's at least one slap per episode. And so we're talking, seriously, we're talking a slap per 60 seconds, which is unhinged. I mean, if you think about it, it's all about emotional hooks. And what is the fastest, most efficient way to display emotion? Violence, physical violence.
Yeah.
You can yell at somebody, and there's a lot of yelling also, and there's a lot of punch-ins, like real big zoom-ins where you see somebody's face and they're just, and if it's not a slap, it's like a door opens and everybody's like this, and it cuts to them, and it cuts to them, and it cuts to this other person.
Yeah, exactly. It creates a then what?
Yeah, exactly. You get the rising action, you get the climax, you get the falling, you get the resolution, like 3 seconds. It's very efficient, and verticals are all about efficiency.
There it is again, efficiency. This idea that keeps cropping up everywhere in the age of AI, of convenience, and of cheap manufacturing. And now it's seeping into human-made art. No more iconic long shots, pondering looks, or reflection, just cut to the action. A slap, a door opening, a door closing. All premise, no plot. And look, don't let me yuck anyone's yum, but if quantity becomes its own form of quality, it's only a matter of time until all entertainment becomes drive-through fast foodified.
These are cheaper than anything that's being made in Hollywood. For example, this is from the Washington Post, but from what we've been able to tell, that places will actually tell you, that these apps will actually tell you, an entire vertical drama series usually is going to cost under $250,000.
That's like less than an episode of anything. Like even a micro budget television production, a commercial, like there's nothing that is this cheap.
Yeah, compare that to a TV show, which a single episode could be a few million, easy, depending on what it is. And we're talking an entire series under $250,000. Figure that a movie at the box office this year, films are averaging something like 13 million. A full film, which again, you can imagine is going to cost multiple millions of dollars. Sometimes they're losing money. A vertical series could do that easy. There are vertical dramas that are doing that. So you put in 100K to 200K and you get out $13 million.
Jeez.
That's a really good investment. And so there are some people who truly care about the art and the craft and getting a message. But then there are other people, and a lot of people, I would argue, who are very interested in the return on investment. They're not super interested in what's in the film. And so, what that means is just, okay, how can we repeat that success? So, for example, at some point, somebody started making werewolf-themed romances. And I think it's because they saw that there were some werewolf-themed novels out there. And so they said, okay, well, let's try making this. And it worked. And now there's a whole bunch of werewolf-themed vertical dramas, like falling in love with the werewolf. I don't get it. It's not for me. But apparently it's for a lot of people. And so people are going to keep cranking that out until that runs its course. But what it also means is that gender roles are very, very traditional. Mm-hmm. I'll just put it this way. I haven't seen a non-white leading man.
And that's another problem that we're just scratching the surface of. When you have to make something creative that panders to our basest of instincts, and with the broadest possible audience, the safest bet is stereotypes. So in that regard, it's no surprise we're basically in the minstrel show era of Hollywood on our phones. Nothing too complicated to understand. nothing that might be out of the ordinary. It's part of this bigger flattening of culture that begs us not to be nuanced, but rather to see the world in black and white without any hint of gray.
The idea of having something on the main screen and having something in your hand, vertical dramas are forcing us, I think, to be very, very frank about what's actually happening. Scenes where somebody thinks about something or pauses to think about what they've done, and the viewer has a moment to feel that, those don't exist because those don't sell. Nuance doesn't sell in basically anything. Nuance doesn't sell. Those times where you kind of think, man, I'm not really sure what to think about that. It's too risky, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, they don't want interpretation. They want you to just keep watching.
Yeah, and it's not some master plan to make the populace stupid.
Right.
The people being stupid, it's a side product.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's a side effect. Again, the point is making money.
Okay, so brass tacks time. How is it better to digest media only in part and only media that challenges nothing and keeps us addicted through the dopamine spikes of endless cliffhangers? This may surprise you, but I don't think it's better. I also don't necessarily think it's worse. Like, of all the topics we've covered so far, the rise of AI in place of community, dark money in politics, the separation of church and state dissolving before our eyes, I think the fiction that people choose to consume may be the least of our problems. And while, on a more base level, it's obviously worse to have a shadow industry with zero unions making slop that requires minimal writers, editors, and craftspeople, I don't know that it's so much worse. You see, entertainment has always evolved for the times we're living in. And for better or worse, it's worse, these are the times we're living in. So, is it better? No. But maybe if our society improves, it could be.